In today's video, we'll be checking out EcoFlow's all-new Wave 2, which can now heat and also cool all in one portable unit. The new Wave 2 will come in at a price of $1,299 or $2,199 with the extra battery, but with early bird specials, you can pick this up at a much better price of $999 or $1,599 with the extra battery, and if this is something that does interest you, I will have discount links down below. The new Wave 2 can put out 5100 BTU of cooling and 6100 BTU of heating, which is like an 1800 watt heater. And when comparing the new Wave 2 to the old Wave 1, this actually is not even comparable as it does so much more, and when looking at the competition, there's not really anything else that can compete with it as it's in a class of its own. Inside the box, you'll have your AC power cord, also a drain tube which is needed for the heating mode, and also some attachments when you need to hook up your intake and also discharge hoses, or one that you'll use as just a blower hose if you were to maybe use this inside a tent. You also have this little piece here which I found that is actually meant for cable management. That way you can keep the cord nice and tidy, but I also found out you can use this to really wrap the cord in and have somewhere to store it. That way when you are moving this around, it'll just stay in place. You will also have your manual and warranty information, and you'll want to download the app and scan the QR code for the full manual. The Wave 2 add-on battery is a 50-volt NMC battery with 1159 watt-hours of capacity and can fully charge in 2.5 hours. It can also be used as a giant charging brick as it does have a couple USB outs. When comparing the extra battery, this actually has more capacity than a Delta 2 from EcoFlow. And if you already are an owner of EcoFlow products, you can use this to power the Wave 2 with a data cable. This makes it more efficient as DC to DC will provide longer run times than an AC to DC conversion, so you can then use Delta Max or Delta Pro to be able to utilize this with your Wave 2, and then you have something else to power it up with besides having to buy the extra battery. The Wave 2 will weigh in at just about 32.5 pounds. But with an add-on extra battery, these are actually pretty simple to install as it just sits on top, clicks in, and then you have an adapter plug. This plugs into the battery and then will plug into Wave 2, but by the time you do add this, you are going to add some significant weight, which now this comes out to almost 50 pounds, which is pretty much exactly the same as my Honda EU2200i. Now when setting this up for use, you have to hook up your intake and your discharge hose with a couple attachments that simply just click on with a little button and some little latches, and then you can go ahead and take the hoses, put them in and give it a little twist and they lock into place. This will be for your intake and your discharge, but if you are using this for a vehicle or maybe a tent, they do have an attachment to be able to hook up the blower hose, so now you can ventilate inside the tent or a vehicle and it simply twists on and locks. Now when controlling the Wave 2, everything can be done from inside the EcoFlow app, which honestly, theirs are the best in the business with a ton of information like solar input, output, and more. All of the functions of the Wave 2 can be controlled by the app, like cooling, heating, or even putting it in fan mode and more. Makes this really intuitive and also very easy to use. You can tell they spend a lot of time on their apps, which I definitely appreciate, and I think every customer out there who has used them will feel the same. I find the app is actually easier to use than the touchscreen that is on the device. Now in testing the Wave 2, I was pretty impressed with the amount of air movement. At over 1,500 feet, this could exchange the air in the room several times. Now this also put out pretty cold temperature, but it wasn't very hot that day. And to give you an idea on air movement, this little fan from Venti, which is a 6-inch fan, which is actually impressive in itself, can move over 900 feet of air in a minute, which is enough to at least exchange the air in a small room several times. Now when this is on heat mode, it does drop down a little bit, but the air outlet temperature was pretty hot at over 121 degrees, which shows pretty much close to the app. Now when it comes to power consumption, the amount of energy that this uses is pretty impressive. While on heat and eco mode, you can see it's only drawing about 256 watts, and when put on max heat mode, it does bump it up between 380, and I did see times where it would jump up to around 450. But now what's even more impressive is when you put it in an air conditioning mode, the amount of energy on max was only using about 236 watts, but drop it down to eco cooling and it goes down even farther. I was only seeing around 156 watts of energy draw while this was in low, but of course it's not very hot today. Now when it comes to running the Wave 2, you can power this with AC or DC, and you can charge it with 12 volt or 24 volt devices or a solar input, which the extra battery can handle up to 400 watts of solar, but you will need EcoFlow solar charge cable, which has the extra pin to allow maximum solar charging of 400 watts. And today I did a quick test, which was under partly cloudy skies, but I managed to get almost 400 watts of solar. Now while using the Wave 2 in heat mode, you'll want to hook up this little drain tube. This is needed because as condensation builds up, it'll fill up the storage compartment, and then it can automatically drain, but the tube does have to be connected. I find that pulling out the plug, then putting on the tube gives you a more secure connection. That way you know that it may not just happen to pop off. Okay, welcome to the little test facility. So I do have the Wave 2 already set up, and I'm only going to have the exhaust out. That way it can recirculate the air in here to make it a little bit more efficient. So what we're going to do is a sound check real quick, and this is with nothing running. Okay, now we have the Wave 2 on full max. And so this should be about as loud as it'll get. It'll whirl up a little bit more, but for the most part, this is it. And now while this kind of whirls down a little bit, we'll do one more sound check with it on the sleep mode. Now with it on sleep mode, this will be the quietest that it'll get after it kind of spools down a little bit. And then of course, when it trickles on and off, it will get quieter. But you can see our starting temp. It's already gone up, maybe a degree. It was 58.5. It is supposed to be about 46 tonight, so it is going to be chilly. You can see right up there, about 60 degrees. I do have a wireless temp tracker. We're going to use that to keep track of the temps all the way through the night. And then, of course, a little guy right down here, which you can see he's got a smile on his face at 60 degrees. So I'm going to try to set this room up at about 63 to 64 degrees. And then this room is about 350 cubic feet roughly, because it's 8 feet wide, about 7.5 feet long, and then about 6 feet tall, kind of depending. So this would be like comparable to a very small trailer. Obviously this is the front bedroom of my RV, or maybe a camper van situation, or a very small room. Okay, and now with this on sleep mode, just so you guys can see how quiet it is. So overall, this thing really is super quiet. It's not very loud. Okay, and with our little Govee tracker over there, that's what we'll keep track of, our temperature and our humidity throughout the night. You can see here, this is starting us off at a pretty cool temperature of about 59.7, already about 60.3. And then our humidity will also go up and down a little bit as well. So we'll see what that looks like as we go through basically an 8-hour test. Now, they say that the battery runs for 8 hours on eco mode, but I think that is more for the air conditioning only. On the heater mode, it is going to draw a little bit more power, but depending on how efficient it is without having the exhaust and the intake coming through the window there, that should make it maybe a little bit more efficient. So I'm assuming we'll get 6 hours, maybe 7 out of the battery on this. So once the room gets to the ambient air temperature of about, I'm going to set it for 65 or 66 on this, and then it should fluctuate up and down. So we'll see what we get after we'll come back out here probably about 7 in the morning, and it's just about 10 o'clock now. And before we go, we will get a little bit of numbers on here. So looking at the app, this really is great because you can see our outlet temperature. I set it for 67, and we'll take a look at our power. This is on battery at the moment. Now look at that, it's only using 218 watts, give or take, and it says we have 5 hours, but this is going to cycle on and off. Like right now, it just shut off. So I may have to turn the room temp up just a click or two because it has come up some. You can see where it's 62 now. Over there we are a little bit colder though, at 60 still. So I'll probably go up about 1 or 2 degrees. We'll set it for 68 maybe, and then we'll see how that does throughout the night. Okay, so this is where the outside thermometer is hanging. That's where you see this on the graph of what our temperatures look like as it hit outside temps. All right, so back in here. So last night did have a small problem with it. It ended up on sleep mode. It didn't kick back on, not really sure why, but I shut it off. And then I put it back into eco. And then if you look here on the graph, it went back up and then started running like it should. It did have to catch up a little bit, so it never really got a chance to shut off because it did cool off. Now, obviously, with it running in here, this morning, I did warm it back up and everything is fine, but we got about 5.5 hours out of the battery. And whenever you run any kind of a heater, heat just draws a lot of power no matter what you use. So that's one of the biggest issues of trying to find heating elements off grid with electric type power, whether it's a standard electric heater or if you're using more of a heat pump like this is definitely way more efficient. It draws a lot less power. But again, using a battery, this is only about 5.5 hours, but I think it's supposed to last about 8 hours on AC. Now, of course, that will depend on your outside temperatures during the day or at night. But overall, you know, 61, 62 degrees at the pillow is where that was measuring, and these were more around the 64, 65 mark, obviously because heat rises, so that's where that was. But I did try to have everything sealed up pretty good. Here is the little water bucket. Really didn't get much out of there, but it probably needs to do a drain cycle again. But overall, the unit did pretty good, so let's close up. All right, so what do you think about the new Wave 2? This is definitely an improvement over the last model that they had. Now, if you're building a van build, doing a small RV, or maybe you have like a little vacation cabin and you want something small, portable, and efficient that will heat and cool the place at the same time, this is definitely a great option as well. I think their app functionality is definitely a premium when it comes to their smart devices. Also, the setup on it is actually not bad. If you just run one tube, that's pretty easy. And the price, especially if you get the early bird special and you take advantage of, like, you know, discounts that you might see on my channel or other channels, then that is definitely a good buy when it comes to only paying $1,000 for this. And then you can also use any other EcoFlow products like Delta Max, Delta Pro, Delta 2 to power this thing up. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I hope you guys liked the video, and until then, I hope to see you next time.